got on the subway. I had to get off. I couldn't. I went to my friend's job, and I was like, you have to pay for a cab for me to get home because I can't be on the subway. I kept thinking that I smelled. I kept thinking that people were looking at me and talking about me. From there on, and it just got worse and worse.
We're talking about a symbiotic relationship between psychiatry and the drug industry. Reminds one a little bit of what Eisenhower talked about when he left office about the military-industrial complex. You have to watch out for what they're doing because they'll just take over.
I knew, and I think people know, that they're not okay, that there's just something is awry, but there's nothing you can do about it.
The pharmaceutical industry is extraordinarily powerful. They just have very, very deep pockets and pretty much do what they want.
They provide lecturers around the country. They sponsor the vast majority of the credit courses doctors have to take to keep their licenses up to date. They provide free conferences in the conferences of the annual meetings of the psychiatric and medical associations. They'll provide dinners and music and breakfasts. It's like a drug company carnival when you go to the annual American Psychiatric Association meetings.
I knew why. I knew it was the drug, and I felt like hopefully it wouldn't get worse, but it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And a lot of it I just don't remember. Honestly, I feel fortunate to have blacked out, and I don't want to remember, or I don't want to know all of the things that I did. I know enough, and while I know it wasn't me, and while I know it wasn't my fault and it was the effect of the drug, it's still unpleasant to think of yourself doing these things. But it got to the point where apparently I was getting violent. So then they eventually, because of that, they had to call the ambulance to come get me.
You can hardly find an academic psychiatrist who is not on the payroll of a drug company. The New England Journal of Medicine, for example, looked for an expert in antidepressant drugs to write a review of antidepressant drugs, and they could not find anyone who qualified as an expert who was not on the payroll of one of the companies making the drugs. I mean, it's like they bought the field.
I remember being put on the stretcher and taken out. I remember being outside and feeling like, just knowing like, okay, like there's an ambulance and I'm on a stretcher. I was just terrified. And I remember I'm in the ambulance and my parents are in there and I'm just really scared. And I went and got to the hospital and I was examined by the doctor. And then they took me to a place, armed guard, like very dark. I weren't allowed to leave your room. So I was in that place, I don't even really know for how long. And we're sort of coming to, I guess, when I was there and asking my mother, what day it was. And I was really surprised. It was like a week later than I thought it was.
But something, I'll tell you, I have a lot of drug reps coming into my office and they start giving me studies. Now, I'm a big believer in research. I've done a lot of scientific research myself, and I continue. But I very frequently tell them, hey, you sponsored this program. Of course you're going to get good results. And that is the problem with a lot of research in this country. The drug companies, if you figure, take one drug, say a statin drug, it's not only sold in the United States, it's sold all over the world. So if a doctor writes one prescription, that's like an annuity to these drug companies. They have unending amounts of money.
The United States makes up less than 5% of the world's population. But in terms of the world's total bill for prescription drugs, the US makes up about half of it. So the cost of drugs and the number of prescription drugs being consumed by Americans is just through the roof.
The pharmaceutical companies are making money hand over fist. The sicker we are, the more profit for their stockholders. I just saw an ad the other day that said, well, not enough people are taking statin drugs for heart conditions. But there was no mention of why not change your lifestyle to prevent the condition in the first place. No mention. Or what role nutrients might play in helping lessen elevated cholesterol or elevated blood pressure, because the science shows that you can do that. But it's not being promoted because it's not patentable. It's not profitable. You don't get, what do you get in this? 35 to 40% markup? Take a look at the markup on drugs. Look at